Hi everyone, welcome again to another best practice video. I'm really pleased to be joined by Ramon Alvarez Pedrosa, who is the Director of Investor Relations at REPSOL. Thank you so much for joining us, Ramon. It's great to have you here.
Thank you to you, Steve. It's a pleasure.
Excellent. So let's start off by talking about 2020. To say that it's posed somewhat of a challenge for investor relations is quite the understatement. So what have you done to navigate your firm's investors through this troubling time?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you said, it has been very difficult times. Also in our industry, we also have the macroeconomic environment of the oil price war between the two main producers. So, I mean, using multimedia, video, conference call, of type of remote tools to communicate with our stakeholders and especially as investors has been paramount. Also, as you may imagine, and most of the companies did, we launched a resilience plan to be able to save cash during 2020, and the investment community received it well, and we were able to communicate that. So I will say that having the ability of communicating remotely has been paramount during these times.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And of course, that sort of oil price dilemma must be very tricky, but yeah, talking about communicating constantly. So on that communication, I know you mentioned, as a lot of investor relations people are dealing with, the sort of digitalization of investor meetings. So could we drill in a little bit more into online events? How have they become more important? What has your experience been like with, you know, virtual investor conferences and roadshows and that sort of thing?
Well, to tell you the truth, frankly speaking, we have had a myriad of different tools out there, different digital platforms. Some of them work very nicely, others not so much. Then you have the problems with the corporate firewalls that you have, and there are some which are not compatible. So at the end of the day, every event has been a type of adventure. And also I must say that a conference call has not also been easy because there are different platforms itself. There are certain sales sites that have very good ones and others which are not so advanced. So we will be able to do a ranking regarding that. But as I said, we at REPSOL embrace digitalization and technology. We use all type of that, but also internally, because we were able to perform our quarterly and our annual presentation of results, and we're able to communicate with investors. But also we have a great challenge with the annual shareholder meeting that we held in May. That also was online remotely, and we use different technologies to enhance the participation online of our shareholders. So at the end of the day, we were able to navigate all that type of events. But there are a lot of different solutions, and you can make a ranking of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned a couple of things there. Firstly, we're all at the mercy of the firewall, the corporate firewall, and in the need for security and protection, there's often some challenges. But as you say, there's some huge advantages to be made in terms of increased participation. So just on that question again, can you give us one piece of advice that you've picked up or that you can share to other people around your sort of virtual IR program, if I could call it that? What's the one sort of thing that you would advise other people that are looking to do virtual meetings, virtual events?
Well, I'll say that I think it's very important to now these days that we have lost human communication face to face. And I think that is not That is not replaceable, but at the same time, there is another advantage that you now these days you can reach the person specifically you need. So sometimes when you go, when we used to go, let's say in past tense, in REPSOL, sometimes you go to a firm, but the person you wanted to see was not there, or there are a substitute. These days, you have the ability to plan and to reach exactly the, for instance, the portfolio manager that are running a specific product that is focused on you. So I mean, you have to combine the disadvantage of not having face-to-face relationship with the possibility these days of reaching the right person, but also as the top management of the company have saved time, there is more possibility of allowing time in the top manager, the CEO, the CFO, to engage with investors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sounds great. And just to pull back on what you mentioned earlier around the macroeconomic changes, I'm really intrigued because I know that it's a big focus for REPSOL, but what sort of factors have been highlighted by those recent macroeconomic changes? Are there particular kind of ESG related factors that have become more important?
Yeah, well, I would say that energy transition and transition into a more decarbonized world and meeting the Paris objectives for net zero emission in 2050 is more crucial than ever. So if the pandemic has shown something, is that the investors are still more focused on energy transition, and we at REPSOL, as we were the first ones which issue our ambition to be net zero by 2050, past December, and then we have been followed by at least the European peers, has been something that we have seen reinforced these days. Also has been very important to reassure that we, first priority is the safety and health of our employees, customers, and the rest of the stakeholders. And there has been an increased interest in all the social aspects of how we have managed the crisis, how the top management has been involved, which are the measures we put in place for protecting our workforce and protecting wages and social conditions. I will say that on the ESG, the E has been always very important, G has been always there, but these days we see more focus on the S part of the three letters.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And you mentioned at the start there as well, and as your ESG report has sort of attracted many plaudits, but you've put in this ambitious net zero target. How are you communicating this to your investors? How are you talking about these issues, and what do investors like about the ESG reporting that you're doing?
Well, you know, we used to be pioneers in terms of communicating climate change. Last November, we hold our 6th Sustainability Day in London, which gathered almost 100 participants from the buy side and sell side investment community, so which was very well attended. And when we launched our ambition to be net zero past December, there was also a lot of expectations. So that's what the investors wanted to see, but not talking only about the final goal in 2050, but with specific interim targets, what you're going to do in 2025, what you're going to do in 2030 and 2040, because talking about 2050 is very, let's say, easy, because probably no one of us will be there. So it's much more difficult to fill the gaps between today and then. And I say that also it was very helpful. One report we published during the last 5 years, which is our annual ESG engagement report that we recently made available in our website, where we summarize all the events surrounding ESG communication, but also we summarize all the main messages we have transmitted to the investment community. So has been very well received, and it's a very interesting and helpful tool. So I encourage you, if you have intellectual curiosity, to download it from our website at repsol.com.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great. And I really like what you mentioned about showing the journey. So not just keeping everything on the long term, but showing the steps that you need to make to get there as well, which I think is really important. I'm also curious, so there's a few changes that have been made during the pandemic. You mentioned the switch to digital, and you know, I'm curious, what sort of changes in 2020 have you made that you're going to keep for the long term as well? So, for example, will you be traveling much less next year, for example? Will you try and get on the road, as you mentioned, the need for that human connection? How's your program going to be changed in the long term?
Well, I think, unfortunately, for the ones that believe in that personal connection and personal relationship and personal trust, I think that this pandemic has changed dramatically the way to communicate. So we are going to see much more events online, much more conference online. I mean, these events of gathering 4,000 people in a hotel in New York, probably we are not going to see, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years, but probably we will not see that again. Also, we have to consider cost-cutting measures, and obviously travel costs and organizing costs are going to be affected for that. So obviously we have to enhance online communication. We have to enhance our personal capabilities to communicate remotely, which are much more different than the personal communication. For instance, recording a video is not so easy and presents challenges. So unfortunately, I think that remote communication is something that is going here to be there. So as I said at the beginning, you have to combine this disadvantage of not having a personal touch with the ability to reach the right person in the buy sites, and also that you have more time of your top management to engage with investors.
Okay, fantastic. No, that's really good. And my final question as well is, what does great investor relations mean to you? So what is that one thing that you believe is critical to IR and that you're always sort of striving for?
Well, I think that, in my opinion, the pandemic hasn't changed the essence of the IR role. So still having a meaningful communication with investors and with analysts is paramount here. So trustworthiness and transparency remains, I think, the key characteristics, and also being able to have a dialogue which solve all of the needs of the investors and the analysts. So the essence of the role has not changed. Obviously, the means to perform your role is the one which is experiencing huge changes and challenges, but also we have tremendous opportunities. So I'm sure that we are going to navigate successfully.
Brilliant, that's great. So there's some really good points there. Your kind of consistent communication comes through a lot. Interesting to sort of look at the future of these investor events where you're not going to have 4,000 people in a hotel in New York, as you say. So, you know, what you need to do to adapt that. And of course, you know, that point around setting targets, whether it's ESG or otherwise, but not just saying where we're going to be in 30 years time, but showing the steps that you need to get there. So really, really good points. I'm sure that would be really helpful for everyone that's watching. And thank you so much for sharing them with us as well. Yeah, really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. And I wish you all success on your events.
Fantastic. Thank you.